I saw some polls last night that were asking European countries, would you turn more to China now? Now, I'd say less than half of them said they would, but I'm curious. I guess I'm watching the shift to a multipolar world. I notice I'm still a little hung up on a unipolar one. However, I do see why we would want European countries to be handling more of their own defense, actually make them be self-sufficient. So I'm definitely behind that. I also see us being the policemen of everything all the time, both in terms of military and enforcing values on everybody, doesn't really work. But I am nervous about kind of ceding to like Russia and China, like what if they just want to grab this or that? And I just wonder, Sean, even with you, like I feel nervous in a world where we don't have a little more, I don't know, a little more dominance. And so I'm struggling with this because I don't know. Do you feel comfortable with a multipolar world?
Yeah. Deborah, thank you. I'll say what I often say. You speak for tens
Great
of millions.
question.
Sean.
Can I just ask, just real quick, Deborah, how do you define multipolar world?
Well, if it's as opposed to maybe the U.S. just sort of being the dominating figure over everything, having, say China, let China kind of do maybe what they want to do, let Russia, we're not really doing anything to undermine them particularly, except maybe economic. I see we're willing to undermine people economically, but now there's a little more like, if they do this, maybe we're going to be okay with it, to be seen.
Yeah. It's a good question. I think one, let's face reality. It's a two-power world. It's the United States and China. Russia has nukes, North Korea has nukes, but they're not economic powerhouses that we fear or worry about. So militarily, even, I would argue that it's just us and China. The answer I would give you, though, is that I think, and this is what President Trump articulates, is that for too long we've been taken advantage of. The Article 5 agreement with NATO in particular, not necessarily Europe writ large, but NATO, which it was that, hey, we'll make a deal with you. If you guys put 2% towards your national defense, we'll all join arms and attack against one. And then they said, okay, well, that's cool. The US will always have our back. So like, instead of us spending our money on our national defense, we'll spend it on other priorities for our own country, our own people. We got taken advantage of for years and decades. And our own, I mean, as I was saying about to Mark a while ago, after the end of the Bush administration, when we looked back, they love to talk tough. They love to tell us what we should do with our money. We're $36 trillion in debt because we look out for everybody else. We're like that kid who keeps coming home to the parents and saying, I just need another loan. And the parents take out a mortgage and then the kid goes and squanders it. Europe has taken advantage of us. They've got money. They can do stuff. And we're only asking them, frankly, to keep up with obligations that they made to all of us collectively. Same thing with Canada, frankly. So I think there's a big difference. We're not turning a blind eye on people who can't pay their bills. They're choosing not to and spending it on themselves while we go into debt and mortgage that debt on our grandchildren's grandchildren, because that's how bad it is now. And we have real existential threats, as I said, with respect to China, because they're not kidding around. So we can either continue to subsidize everyone else at our own peril, or we can focus on us and make sure that we do have the strength and fortitude to take on the challenge that China will pose to us within 24 months.
Yeah, I just think there's a tone to it potentially. It's like I totally agree with this. Like, let's actually make them be strong. Macron apparently was sort of embracing it. I was hearing it. It was sort of like, great, let's build up our own.
By the way, I would
to
say
make
this,
military.
The European press, and this is not like, they are some of the most arrogant, elitist. As much as I hate most of the U.S. press, the European press puts them to shame.
Just quickly with Deborah, because I agree with Sean. Politically, I think the country is completely where Sean is, or the majority of the country. The thing that I always keep coming back to with this is the Godfather adage, right? In the opening scene of The Godfather, he puts his arm around the guy and he says, look, someday I may call on you to do a favor. That day may never come, but when it does, you're going to do a service for the Don, right? The reason that we do things for people is there will come days when we need help, where we need favors, either economically, militarily. After 9/11, the number of countries that joined us in Afghanistan, who lost soldiers on the battlefield, to everyone's benefit, but really primarily on our behalf. The more that you govern or you operate or negotiate with threats, and like we are the alpha and you are like the weakling, someday it's going to bite us in the butt.